Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. I am a senior dream curator with DreamBank. On behalf of our team, we are so thrilled to have you with us here today. You know, as we get started, we always like to learn where you're joining us from and encourage you to share so or do so in the chat section if you're comfortable with this. And for those of you who aren't familiar, would love to take a few moments and introduce you to DreamBank. So here at American Family Insurance, we believe that communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. And that's why DreamBank was created. It's an inspirational community destination and digital experience that is dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, overcome obstacles, and to stay motivated. Really excited to introduce our featured speaker today, though, Laura Colbert. So from educator to Parks Rec director, and as a Jill of all trades, she enjoys spending time with her family of 5, traveling, doing anything outdoors, reading, remodeling homes, learning, consulting, and public speaking. And on any given day, you'll see her with a book, a hammer, a paintbrush, or a paddle. Without further ado, though, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Laura. Laura, take it away.
Thanks for having me. The first thing I'm going to do is share my screen. Okay. All right, we good? Oh, not quite yet. 1 second. All right.
Looks good.
The title screen, great. Okay, thank you again for having me. So today we're going to talk about behind the uniform, the untold truths of veterans. Hopefully that is where you want to be. So before I even get going, I want to share a little caveat with you. Every single person's story is different. And when it comes to veterans, you could have somebody in the same squad. So a team of 9, and every single person walks away with something very different from that experience. So please understand that I am one story. I cannot replace somebody else's. And as veterans, we all suffer and heal in our own way and in our own time. The 4 different things we're going to talk about today. First, I'm going to introduce my time at war so that you understand some of the trials and tribulations that I've been through. Talk about what I like to refer to as the ascent from hell with the post-traumatic stress, moral injury, and unfortunately for many veterans, suicide. Misconceptions about being a veteran, and then the nuances of speaking to a veteran. So let's start with the introduction. Andy, thank you for the original introduction. And I'm just going to add on that I am a combat veteran and a post-traumatic stress sufferer. You can see here that I have a beautiful family of 5. My 3 wonderful children are 5, 7, and 9. And I have a wonderful supportive husband. And on the far right of the screen, you'll see my book, Sirens, How to Peace Standing Up. It was based on these 2 journals that I wrote while I was in Iraq. They're filled and I converted them into a book. And I am happy to answer any questions either along the way, and we will definitely leave time for Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions, write them down, or if something doesn't make sense to you in the moment, feel free to ask. All right, so my military timeline looks like this. I signed up in March 2001 when I was a freshman at UW-Madison. And, you know, it was 6 months before September 11th. It was full of peacetime. And one of my best friends said, do it. What's going to happen in the next 6 years? And then 6 months later, September 11th happened. And it really changed the face of what my National Guard unit was all about. And again, or I don't know if I told you, but I signed up as a military police officer. We were deployed. We were put on active duty 4 days before we invaded and bombed Iraq. So we were at Fort McCoy when that happened in March 2003. We were deployed for a total of 16 months and returned home at the very tail end of July 2004. And in 2005, September, it was actually at the exact same time Hurricane Katrina was barreling through New Orleans. I started suffering terrible post-traumatic stress and had my first panic attack. And that was known as late onset post-traumatic stress. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And then in March 2009, I got my honorable discharge. So I'm going to just take a few moments to share with you my time while in Baghdad, Iraq. And We were the very first permanent establishment in Baghdad after the Marines came through. So as you can see on the top left of the screen, that was our home. We lived in a bombed out resort that was owned by one of Saddam Hussein's top leaders. And my room was, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but this was my room right here. And we slept with 13 females in that one space. We only had 2 walls. And down here, you can see all the pieces of shrapnel and bricks that flew out from that building. And there was remnants from our bombs left in that building while we lived there. After about 2 months, we got the approval from engineers or somebody that said, yes, you can go live in the basement. And as you can see in this photo, I'm ecstatic about it because for the first time we have air conditioning, running water, flushable toilets, and showers where you can manage the temperatures. Because before we move down there on the bottom left, you can see our showers were outdoor and they were garden hoses connected to the irrigation system. And we took that metal that you see in the picture and we put that in the ground and wrapped our ponchos around it for some privacy. And then on the bottom right, you can see that we had a pool. It was not usable for the first few months, but we hired an Iraqi pool person who came in and cleaned it out. And it was an incredibly huge morale booster to have that in our compound. I'm going to take a second to go back to that shower though. Being a woman at war is different. And I'm going to get into a lot of these things here in a second. But one of the things that happened to us while we showered was helicopter pilots would hover above our showers to see what they could see. So sometimes I give them the middle finger, sometimes I'd cover up, but it was not okay. And because of that, and not that specifically, but because women are sometimes treated differently, there exists a lot of military sexual trauma. You may have heard the acronym MST. I'm not a fan of applying an acronym to military sexual trauma because I feel like it takes away from how terrible this actually is. I'm going to give you a stat here that was in September 2021 GovExec. It says that military sexual trauma affects 55% of women and 38% of men. I'm going to say that again, 55% of women and 38% of men. 71% of female veterans are seeking therapy to treat post-traumatic stress from military sexual trauma. I am no expert. I am sharing a stat with you. I will tell you though, that when I was there, and I can't speak to 2022, but when I was in, it was definitely still, you go along with what the guys did. And if you rock the boat, you were going to be seen as otherwise. I was very, very fortunate in that I don't suffer from military sexual trauma. So I feel like I can talk to you about it, but I do know many, many other women who do suffer from it. Now, a few things about being a woman that you may not know about or think about. So per my book's subtitle, How to Pee Standing Up, I learned how to use a Fleet Farm funnel. It was literally an oil funnel that I bought for 99 cents and I camouflaged it with spray paint. And I learned how to pee standing up with that so that I could go to the bathroom when we were in Baghdad, Iraq. When you're in an urban fighting environment, especially in such a conservative country, you can't just pull your pants down and go to the bathroom like say you can on a backpacking trip or in the woods. And I couldn't go to a local restaurant or house and ask to use a bathroom because they might be the enemy. I might not come out alive. So I learned how to go to the bathroom using a funnel, just like the guys did. And I'd open the Humvee door and stand there and go. There were a few Iraqi police officers who were really like, what's happening? And then I'd show them my funnel and they'd laugh and it'd be a big joke. So that's one thing that was different for women. I had to learn how to go to the bathroom differently. I also took birth control while I was deployed so that if we were in a really tumultuous time, I could skip my period and not have to worry about taking care of that if I didn't know if I was going to be home in the next 24 hours or 12 hours or whatnot. And so that's another thing that men don't have to think about. And that was really before IUDs were famous or a normal thing. So those allow you to skip it, but I just took birth control. And I want you to think about too, what it's like for women to wear uniforms, specifically jumpsuit type uniforms. And if they have to take all their that'll rattle off to go to the bathroom. It can be time consuming and dangerous if they're taking their bulletproof vests off. We had two pieces, just a normal, it was called desert camo uniform. So I was lucky, but I'll tell you what, we had a 40-pound vest on our bodies, and that caused a ton of chafing with my bra. So I just stopped wearing a bra because I would have red marks all over my chest from that bra, from the bras. So again, something you don't normally think about as a woman. All right, so we suffered quite a few Purple Hearts. My company did. It was about 130, 140 individuals in my company, and we're from the Madison and Milwaukee, Wisconsin areas. We got there, like I said, at the very beginning. And by October, the way I describe it is we went from liberating the Iraqis, where they loved us, to occupying the country, where they started to hate us. So instead of waving at us and saying good America, we were getting the thumbs down, and bad America, and we were getting rocks thrown at us, and they wanted us to leave. So we were working in this police station called El Shaab. It's on the northeast side of Baghdad, right by Sadr City, which is a very famous city, or famous part, very poverty-stricken but famous part of Baghdad, very dangerous part. And anyways, we worked right next door. Our police station El Shaab was destroyed on October 27th, 2003 by a single car bomb, just one. And look at the crater that it created. And I don't know if you can see, but there's a soldier standing right here by the crater, to give you some idea of how incredibly large this blast was. It killed 21 people, 5 of whom were Iraqi police officers that we had grown to know and love, and over 100 people overall that were just civilians. This was an incredibly traumatic time while I was there. We were the first squad that came there after the blast occurred. And our job was to take concertina wire, which is that circular razor wire, and hold on to it and walk it towards the crowd to get them to get away from the police station. We estimated 4,000 people there. And we had to get them away from the police station because we were still getting threats of more attacks, and we didn't want them to get attacked as well. So I stood in this little area right here, and I watched as fathers were carrying their charred, burned, and dead children out of this building here, the same kids that I would watch on a daily basis while I pulled guard at the police station. And if you do have my book, or you are thinking of getting it, you can read more about this on page 163. One of the hardest parts about our deployment was getting extended over and over and over. When we were first deployed, they said, okay, great, 6 months, that's how long you're gonna be gone. I said, okay, I can drop my classes that I'm taking as a junior again at UW-Madison, and then pick them back up in September. Maybe I can start a few weeks later, and I'll only miss a semester of school. So it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Well, September came and went, and then they said, well, you'll be home before any major holiday. Thanksgiving came. I was supposed to see President Bush at the time, and went to the wrong side of the chow hall and missed that opportunity, but that's another story. And then all of a sudden they said, you'll be home before Christmas. Well, Christmas happened, and I did see my father join this group, and I know he's listening right now. And I happened to call my parents on Christmas Day, and mortars landed in my compound. And so I ran for my life into the basement, and I called them back later, and it happened again. So that was my gift to my parents on Christmas Day, is that I was mortared twice, and they heard it both times. Then they said, you'll be home by January 29th. I went home on leave on January 2nd. And so a 2-week leave, if I got to go home by January 29th, that's not bad, right? Well, then they took that away and said 1 year of active duty, which meant we'd be home by March 2004. They took that right away again. And then they said 1 year of boots on the ground. We had gotten to Kuwait on May 9th, which meant that we would be home by May 9th, 2004. Okay, this finally seemed like it was coming to fruition. We'd started cleaning our gear. We'd started sending tents home and night vision goggles that we weren't using. I had a whole box of fun games that my friends and family sent me, and I sent all that home. We were the only platoon still on duty, and our job was kind of posh. We were escorting around UN ambassadors, the Australian UN ambassador, the people in charge of all the money in Iraq, senators, and just really high-ranking personnel that needed additional escorts. That was our job for the month of April. And all the other platoons were just cleaning their equipment and getting ready to go home. Well, at the beginning of April, our platoon sergeant comes into our room and says, gear up, the police stations are getting overrun by insurgents, we got to go and pull guard. So we went to El Shab, we pulled guard. They decided to do 4 days straight in the police stations. So we had to do our escort mission, go to the police stations till 2 a.m. And then we had to wake up the next day and do our escort mission. And so it was maybe 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night, but for 4 days, I could do that. I could handle it. Okay, let's get it done. One of the nights we were driving back at 2 a.m. and we started getting attacked. There were small arms fire shooting at us from about 10-story buildings. And then a roadside bomb went off behind our convoy. And I was the lead driver in the Humvee. So I gunned it into the green zone and we were all safe. Our vehicles weren't harmed. Nobody was injured. We were very, very, very lucky to be unscathed. The very next night, again at 2 a.m, we took a different route home because in the war zone, you never do the same thing twice because it's easy to set up ambushes. And Michelle Whitmer, her convoy was hit at the exact same place, at the exact same time as ours on their way home. And she didn't make it. She was a gunner in the Humvee. She was the very first female, I apologize, to be killed in the National Guard, in the history of the National Guard. And she just so happened, I know I'm breaking every law in slideshow by putting this on here, but I want you to see it. Because Michelle wrote this email to her twin sister who was also deployed to Baghdad as a medic. And then Michelle's older sister was in our unit. So 3 Whitmer girls were overseas at the exact same time. Michelle wrote this to her twin sister on the day that she died. It says, hey, sweetie bear, life here has been very crazy the last week or so. About 5 days ago, our platoon sergeant starts running into our rooms saying the Baghdad police stations are overrun and there are riots all over the city. In the meantime, we're getting attacked almost nightly with RPGs, mortars, and small arms fire. Rachel's station in Adamia, and that's the police station we were in at this time, got the worst of it. I was really afraid for her. Charity, please pray for us. This is some scary shit. Hopefully by next week, this will all be over. Love you forever. And later that very day, as I mentioned, she was shot and killed. And then on the bottom right, you can see that's where we held her memorial service. It was on the side of the pool at our compound. And if you want to read more about that, it's on page 20 or 222. Easter Sunday was 2 days later. Michelle died on the 7th, and on Easter Sunday, it was the 9th, I believe. And I called my parents, and it was a bittersweet conversation because yes, we lost Michelle Whitmer, but we had a light at the end of the tunnel of being able to come home. And so my parents and I were talking about a trip to Washington, D.C. I was talking about going to New York City to visit my best friend, about drinking coffee and sitting on the deck and watching the birds. And I said goodbye, love you, and went back to my mission. And about 3 hours later, they called all of us back to the compound and they told us that we were extended for 4 more months. So after losing Michelle, 2 days later, we got extended for the 7th time on our deployment. We had this sick joke that we were actually already in hell, and that was our hell, is that they would tease us with home and then they would take it away from us. I would have dreams of being at home and wake up as though it was a nightmare because all I wanted to do was be home. And I just didn't think it was going to happen. And again, breaking rules, but this is an email I sent home 2 weeks after being extended, and it really depicts the raw emotions I was feeling. Another week of missing home, more than I can say. It's been a rough one, a lot of emotions and not many of them good. This place is taking a toll on me. My hope and morale have been drained from my system. Now I'm just a pile of skin and bones that does what I'm told. It's hard to even think for myself anymore. I just don't care. I don't care when mortars hit. I don't care when an IED goes off. I'm numb. That's why they need to get us out of here. We have nothing left mentally or physically. It is completely inhumane what they have done to us. We are tortured souls. And at this point, I wanted to get hurt. I wanted to get shot. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to commit suicide, but I just didn't see another way home. I didn't think it was ever going to happen. 16 months from a small little 6. So after they extended us, we moved out of our pseudo fortified basement into tents on the south side of Baghdad, where we got mortared on a nightly basis. And we started working in police stations 2 hours south of Baghdad. And when you drive that much, you are way more prone to hit an IED. And this particular IED hit 2 vehicles behind mine. It was the only Humvee. I don't know if you can tell, but this tan here, this is a kit. It is a bulletproof kit that is only bulletproof where the tan is, and the rest is soft metal. And they targeted this specific vehicle because it had the kit on it and not fully up armored. The gunner was knocked unconscious. They couldn't find her. She was stuck in the fetal position in the back. She had bruises and lacerations over her entire left side of her body. The driver was sucked out of the vehicle from the impact of the bomb. So you've seen those mushroom clouds where everything just kind of goes up into the sky. It was like that. It blasted the vehicle and then it pulled her out. The passenger behind her was knocked unconscious. And then the driver or the passenger in the front saw that they were going to slam into this garage, and he jumped out of the moving vehicle so he wouldn't slam into the garage. We medevaced everybody but that front passenger on the helicopter because they were all so severely wounded and bleeding and bruised and unconscious. I'm just going to share one more thing with you. And for those of you that aren't religious, just stay with me, because when we were in those tents, you didn't know if you're going to wake up the next day. We'd wake up and 7 tents down, there'd be giant holes in a tent. I was walking to the chow hall one day and mortars landed and chunks of the mortar skidded to my feet. I was in the gym one day, 5 minutes after I got in there, after using the porta potty, we were just annihilated with mortars. And I walked out to go see what I could do because I am combat lifesaver certified. That same porta potty was incinerated by the bomb. So you just never knew, no matter where you were, what you did, if you were going to make it out based on those mortar attacks. So I would say the prayer, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take, because that was my only hope. I mean, you could run to the bunker when the mortars are flying in, but they could hit you on the way to the bunker, and the bunker were 2-sided, so they weren't fully safe either. Or you could lay in bed and they'd hit the bunker while you stayed in bed. You just didn't know. And so it was such a crapshoot for the 2-3 months that we lived there. So finally, at the end of July, I was able to come home. And on the picture on the left, you can see my parents. It's my mom and my dad. My dad wouldn't stop looking at me. And it was so bizarre, but I'm like, Dad, you gotta stop. And he's like, but Laura, you're here and you're safe. And I said, oh my gosh. Or now as a parent, I can't imagine what he must have been going through, what my mom must have been going through. You know, before I left, my dad sat me down and handed me a $2 bill. And I said, you better not make me cry, Dad. And he said, I found this dollar bill in my dad's wallet, and he passed. So it was my grandfather's $2 bill. He said, this was the lucky $2 bill, and I want you to take this $2 bill with you everywhere you go. And I did. It was in my front pocket of every single uniform I wore every single day. When I got home, I handed my father that $2 bill. And I said, I'm home and I'm safe. The other thing that was so bizarre was loving human touch. It was foreign to me. When my dad and my mom put their arms around me, I almost wanted to shrug away from it. So just think, like 16 months, what that can do to your humanity, to your love. On the right picture here, you can see my whole family. I have a twin brother who's in the blue shirt, and then my older brother was also in the military. He was 60 miles west of me in Ramadi from September 2003 until September 2004. So yes, 2 out of the 3 Naylor kids, Naylor was my maiden name, were deployed at the same time. And it was, again, very hard on the other 3 that were left behind. But boy, what a joyful day that was. My brother got home on September of 04, and we all went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and it was just so great to be together again. Okay, we're going to move on to the second section of today's presentation, and that is what I, again, call the ascent from hell, thanks to Sergeant Hart Hillman's quote, where he says, "The return from the killing fields is more than a debriefing. It is a slow ascent from hell." So I don't know how popular the term moral injury is, but I'm going to take a second to describe it. When we grow up learning that killing somebody is bad, that hating other people is bad, that constantly worrying about yourself and not anybody else is bad. And when you go to war, yes, you worry about your brothers and your sisters in arms, absolutely. But did I worry about those Iraqis once they started attacking me? No, I did not worry about the Iraqis. Did I want to kill somebody when they shot at us and hurt our people? Heck yeah, I wanted retribution. And so we go to this place and we get brainwashed, not even brainwashed so much as like, you have to have a complete 180 flip of everything you've learned in your life to be able to survive in a war zone. So when you come home and you have to reacclimate to knowing like, oh, it is bad to kill people, I shouldn't have those thoughts. I've been giving this presentation since I got home in 04. I gave my first presentation about 2 months after I got home. I gave it at my local high school, and since then, one of those same people has seen my presentation. She goes, "Laura, you are so much less angry than you were when you got home and you first gave this presentation." And I just find that so interesting. I wonder if this moral injury had a lot to do with that. The next thing that I want to talk about is post-traumatic stress. We've all heard it as PTSD. I think it's really time to take the D off, and I know the VA hospital is really trying to do that. It is post-traumatic stress. It is not necessarily a disorder. Yes, it takes over your being, but when we start putting the label of disorder onto it, it's a lot harder for some people to stomach saying that they have a disorder than just they have a sort of stress. I'm going to share another stat with you, and I'm going to jump down to suicide real quick. We have had, as you know, 22 veterans a day commit suicide. And that is, I mean, 1 is too many, but 22 is just a tragedy. And I don't know if you've heard, but we've lost over 30,000 military personnel post 9/11 from suicides. I'm going to say that again, over 30,000 post 9/11 veterans from suicide, compared to the 7,000 that we lost in combat. We've lost 4 times the amount to suicide. It is time that soldiers start realizing that it's okay to ask for help, that post-traumatic stress is not the end all to everything. And I know I gave some perspective as being a woman, but I have to tell you, I can't imagine being a man coming back and suffering post-traumatic stress, because when you grow up hearing, be a man, that's not manly, be tough. And then all of a sudden you get post-traumatic stress, this thing that you have zero control over. And let's say you have to be the breadwinner of the family and now you can't hold down a job. It can be completely defeating. And yes, it was terrible and horrible for me to go through my really, really, really terrible post-traumatic stress time. But at least I didn't have that added societal pressure that some men have. So how do we create this idea? How do the VA hospitals, and how does the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and all of the military installations, how do we make sure that all soldiers know combat stress, battle fatigue, all of these things, shell shock that we've said in the past, this happens. It happens, it could happen right away. It could happen while you're there. It could be late onset. It could happen 25 years down the road. Mine happened a year later after I got home because I was at sergeant school and I was in a simulated war scenario where they were shooting off fake grenades and we were wearing Miles gear, which is like laser tag, but with guns, making real gun sounds. And I could not stop thinking about war. No matter what I was telling myself, like, get over it, Laura, you're home, you're safe, look at over there, like this is Wisconsin, we're at Fort McCoy. I couldn't stop getting flashbacks of war in my head. And I started hyperventilating. And they thought I was having a heat stroke. So they started taking my clothes off and I was like, no. I just got back from 120-degree temperatures in Baghdad. This is nothing. And then I finally realized that I was having a panic attack. And I'm going to come back to that panic attack in just a second. But I just wanted to share this slide with you about these three different parts of what soldiers can suffer from. So we're going to go on to misconceptions now. So this is the third section out of the four. I have this picture here because this is that day after, or this is the day that Al Shab was destroyed. And I said that there was a crowd of 4,000 people and we had to push them back with this concertina wire. And you can see in this photo that very concertina wire, and you can see the giant crowd. And I just want to point out, there's not a woman in this crowd because of their culture. But now look at those two gunners, at least one of them is female. So you can't tell me that women weren't on the front lines in 2003 and 2004. There is no front lines. Front lines is such an arbitrary term. It's not like we line up in a trench and we wait to get attacked and we all charge. It is wherever you go. You just heard stories about me being in my compound, not knowing if I was going to survive through the night. The front lines just don't exist anymore. We had infantry working in our police station to help hold security, and then they would ask us to come with them on missions to help search the women. So we were interchangeable with the infantry on various missions while we were deployed. Yes, women are allowed now in all branches of the military, which didn't happen before 2015, but don't say they weren't allowed on the front lines. Now, again, as a woman, here's a few things that I had to hear and listen to and talk about when I got home. So I am not invisible as my quote on top because specifically the Madison Veterans Museum and I believe elsewhere throughout the country, they are doing campaigns about women veterans, calling it I am not invisible, because there are a lot of us and there are going to be more of us. And so to assume that the man you see driving the car that has a veteran's plate on it is the veteran, you can't do that anymore. You can't assume when I walk into the VA with my husband that he's the veteran because he's not. Funny story is my husband gets all the veteran junk mail because he's the man of the house. I don't get veteran junk mail, he does. Again, not a veteran, he's not. So I first got home and I hadn't had a physical for 2 years because I was at war and I'm like, I need to get a full physical wellness check. So I went into the VA because I was a veteran and the doctor that was seeing me said, we can't do all that stuff you need. We don't serve women here. Well, thank God I was going to UW-Madison and there's a veterans center there. And I went in and she said, she was so upset, the woman who worked there. She said, there is a women's clinic at the VA hospital now. You go back there and you get everything you need done. And so thank God they had services that I needed and I got everything taken care of. But even a VA doctor did not know that there was a women's center in the very VA that he worked. When in 2007, I moved to England for a few months and taught physical education there, which was, it's a whole nother story. But one of my coworkers, I told her I was a veteran and I served at war. And she's like, did you carry a gun? And I said, yeah, I carried two. In fact, I had my rifle and my pistol. And then she asked, well, was it a woman's war? And I was like, I'm sorry, has there ever been such a thing as a woman's war? So again, just misconceptions. I think one of the very hardest things that somebody said to me once was, oh, no, that's not what happens at war. I have a friend that went there and it's not anything he described. And I was so taken aback. I'm like, I was there. You were not. But I was 22 and I was kind of ignorant. And I was like, oh my God, am I misspeaking? Is that really not what my experience is like? For a quick hot second, I second guessed myself, but that was just like so inappropriate what he said to me. I've walked in the VA before, and then they asked, who are you here to see? And I said, nobody. I'm the veteran. I'm here to see a doctor. And then when we were in Iraq, we had been there for 9 months. Our battalion shifted from, a brigade shifted from like 82nd Airborne to 5th Cav. And there was a whole set of new soldiers that had not been overseas yet. And one of the infantry gunners said to one of our female gunners, you even know how to use that thing? And he's lucky he did not walk away with a gunshot, because she was so mad that he said that to her after she had been in combat for 9 months. A lot of anger going on out there. There is a gentleman, his name is, and I don't want to get this wrong, his name is Jason Moon, and he did a video called 7 Things You Never Say to a Veteran. So a few of these are mine, and a few of these I am borrowing from him. If you are interested, he does give free DVDs out to veterans, and has a really great story to tell about his post-traumatic stress. Great might not be the right word, but it's a very powerful story that he has to share. So one of the things you should avoid when speaking to veterans is questions that might trigger post-traumatic stress. When you ask somebody, how many people did you shoot? Did you kill anybody? Tell me about the worst day over there. You're invoking terrible, horrible memories, which can just unleash the post-traumatic stress. I put this picture on the slide because it shows that car bomb. So remember when I showed you the first picture of the car bomb, I was standing right here. These are all homes of families that perished. This used to be a 2-story home right here. So yes, that was a very tragic day for me. And I was an educator for many years, and I would give my presentations to my students, and they would ask me that question. I said, okay, you can ask me that question and I'm going to answer you honestly, but please don't ask any other veterans how many people you've killed. And this is what I tell them. I say, I am so thankful that I did not ever have to take another human life. I was the driver, so my job was to get us out of the kill zones while my gunner did what he had to do. Avoid the following when speaking to veterans. Number 2, assuming you know what they've been through based on prior conversations. You might have an uncle, you might have a sister, you might have a grandfather or a friend who served. Please don't assume that their time at war can take over the new veteran's time at war that you're speaking with. It's very similar to that conversation I had before. If I'm telling you a story and I'm finally talking about it, it's not a time to intervene and interject and start sharing stories that you heard from so-and-so. Just listen. Another thing to avoid is assuming that the veteran is okay just because they're physically okay. I went through about 6 months of complete hardship where I couldn't function normally. I called my older brother on the way to a practicum while I was getting my teaching degree, and I said, you have to come and pick me up. I was at the Viola Zoo in Madison and I couldn't drive anymore. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop perseverating over my negative thoughts. And I said, you need to take me to the VA hospital. And thank God he lived in Madison, and thank God he understood, and he got in that car quick and he drove me to the VA hospital and I got the help I needed, but I couldn't function anymore, even though I was physically okay. Things that you can say to a veteran. Welcome home. I'm going to say this right now. If any of you are out there and you are a Vietnam veteran, I want to thank you for not only your service, but for making my transition home so much easier. When you say welcome home to a veteran, it is heartfelt, it is meaningful, it is, no matter when we got home, it means something. And then number 2 just says nothing, just listen. If you have a veteran who's finally willing to talk to you, it's not a time to one up. It's not a time to share what you've heard, as I mentioned earlier. It is a time to let them talk, because chances are you may be one of the only people that they're willing to talk to. My father-in-law, when I first started dating my husband, had never told them stories. But when him and I got together, he opened up to me, and my husband and my mother-in-law just happened to be sitting in the same room. And they said, Laura, we've never heard him say these things before, because we were listening. And he had an audience that could listen. I love this next one. And this one is again from Jason Moon. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Now, listen, if you know a veteran who signed up but never went to war, chances are they are suffering from survivor's guilt. If you know a veteran who did go over there, but somewhat begrudgingly, at least they were willing to sign on the dotted line. They were willing to give up their life for our country. So thank you for your willingness to serve. I just think that's so, so powerful. There are so many times when people tell me, oh, I can't even talk to you about war because I didn't even go over there. And I just signed up and I had it easy. I'm like, no, but you were willing to do it. So you can't diminish that fact. And then another good question, another really benign question is, why did you join? I joined because I was in crew in my freshman year and really wanted to stay in shape. And so I thought the military would help me do that. I love adventure. I wanted to travel and I loved the idea of serving my country and giving back. And then, who doesn't want their college paid for? That was a huge bonus. So again, a really easy and benign question to ask. I want to just, as we're approaching Veterans Day on Friday, I really want to take a second to just talk about the difference. Veterans Day is a day to commemorate all who served. So saying Happy Veterans Day is just fine. It's just fine. Another thing that you could say on Veterans Day is thank you for your service. It's an honor to know you. Thank you for your sacrifices. Thank you for being willing to serve. Thank you for helping to keep us free. All of those things are wonderful things to say to veterans. Memorial Day is very different. Memorial Day is a day to remember those who died serving our country. I will tell you that on Memorial Day, it is not an easy day for me. As you know, we lost Michelle Whitmer, so my day is spent memorializing her. And I also think of Joe Thompson, who, when I got home from Iraq and I got my sergeant stripes, he was one of my first team members and such an awesome person, full of life, so fun. And he volunteered to go to Afghanistan and died in Afghanistan. And so now I remember both them during Memorial Day. And if you're saying, oh gosh, what do I say during Memorial Day? Well, you could say, I hope you have a meaningful day. I'll be thinking of those who we lost, right? Just finding that commonality. Or you could say, I'll also be remembering those who didn't return home. Just making sure that it's not all about barbecues and partying in the beginning of summer, but rather I'm here for you, I'm here with you, and I will remember with you. Those thoughts and ideas are so, so powerful. One more thing that I think is really, really important as far as post-traumatic stress goes is don't ever tell somebody to get over it. When I first had my post-traumatic stress panic attack at sergeant school, I had a medic who sat me down after they took me away from everybody, took me away from the drama, the mess. He sat me down. He's like, stop crying. It's not going to help anything. And I was so angry with him that I almost punched him. I almost physically attacked him because I had so much anger inside of me. And I said, have you ever been overseas? And he said, no. And I said, then don't come near me and don't talk to me because you have no idea what I'm going through. And luckily for me, my post-traumatic stress resonates through tears and crying. Okay. I was just telling somebody, I'm so lucky it doesn't manifest itself in me trying to I don't have to self-medicate through alcohol and drugs. I don't get angry at the world and have my temper doesn't get out of control. I simply just kind of become a little bit of a shell. I cry and then I get over it. But just know that every single veteran goes through this in their own way. I know somebody who was driving one day and he completely blacked out, while on a highway and had to pull the car over and get out and blindly flag down a car because he thought he was having a heart attack and dying. And it was simply, not simply, but it was a panic attack. You just really never know when or how veterans are going to be affected. And I really hope that these next two slides will help you to understand even a minute amount. So my life as a veteran. There was a time when I could feel unadulterated happiness, a time when my life was innocent and carefree. I got home from Iraq and I would look at my photo albums and think, I'm never going to smile this big again. I'm never going to feel this innocent ever again. I was desecrated by the horrendousness of war. A piece of me was left behind somewhere in desolate Iraq. That piece feels like a tiny hole in my heart some days, and other days it feels like it sucks me in whole, leaving me with nothing but the darkness to stare at and relish in. I was no longer innocent or happy. Through time, this hole has become manageable, and that happiness I felt before the killing fields is slowly finding its way back into my being. I am becoming the person I once was, but it's been a difficult journey. Take a second to consider the veteran, the person who gave everything to serve their country only to return home to feel ostracized, changed beyond recognition, and afraid of their new internal war. Personally, a sound, sight, or smell can trigger intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, and pure agony. The war a veteran faces is not over once the soldier steps on American soil. It will always be there lingering. It's the sound, for me, it's the sound of thunder, fireworks, a door slamming, a gunshot, the smell of a specific hand soap, that aromatherapy from Bed Bath & Beyond, the full moon, a piece of garbage on the road, a song on the radio, the list can go on and on. Triggers are elusive yet real. Veterans are everywhere and are affected differently by war. Be cognizant of them always. I'm going to take a second to just tell you about the full moon and the garbage on the side of the road, because all of these have come from my own experiences. So when I was in Baghdad, it was the month of August of 2003, and we were doing the night shift at El Shab police station. And so every night I watched as that moon shifted and waxed and waned, and I saw the entire lunar cycle throughout that month. And the one thing I thought every single time I saw it was, this is the same moon my parents just saw, and this is the same moon that they're going to see after me. And I knew that that was my connection to them on a daily basis, that I wasn't on a foreign planet, that I could actually be in the same world and see the same things as them without even having to talk to them. And so one night I was out kind of late, and I was walking home, and the moon was full and bright, and it reminded me of exactly being on that roof in Baghdad, and I just lost control. I just started bawling and I couldn't stop, and that was my post-traumatic stress in that situation. One other thing that I want to mention is the garbage. So when you're in Baghdad and there's IEDs on a consistent basis, and as a driver, my job was to avoid anything on the side of the road, pieces of garbage, when the road looked like it had been dug up and put back on, a box, anything. And so when I got home and I'm driving on a side road in my tiny little Nissan Sentra, and I saw a bag on the side of the road, I moved over to the other lane, and I almost had a head-on collision with a car coming at me, because here I was in Baghdad in my Humvee that everybody gets around or moves around, and I'm getting away from this bomb. But in reality, I was in Wapaka driving a tiny little car. So you never really know when it's going to come or what's going to happen. And that's one of those things that I just want you to keep in mind if you have veterans in your life. I can't tell you how many red lights I yielded at in Madison instead of stopping at, because that's what we did in Baghdad. Because you can't stop, you might get attacked. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation. I'm happy to, if you know of somebody else who could benefit from this, I am constantly trying to close the civilian and military divide and create those bridges so people can better understand each other. But ultimately, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and I will answer any questions you have.
Thanks so much for that, Laura. I appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your experiences with us. It's definitely insightful. I know for me in particular, someone who has not served in the military, has several close friends and family members who have served in the military. And hearing, like you said at the beginning, this is just one story. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us. Couple questions for you, if that's okay.
You bet, you bet.
So everyone has their own definition of success, and I know that you kind of shared the just the general overall experience that you had. What are some of your proudest achievements within the military that you've had?
Well, physically, I always held myself to the men's standards because I'm just kind of I guess, natural born overachiever. And so I was really proud that I could do 45 push-ups in a minute, and the 2 minutes was a max. And I was in the top running group. And so that was a really proud thing. I'm obviously very proud to have served our country overall and to be able to tell my story. And I've had many, many people read my book and just thank me for helping them to better understand the veterans in their lives. And to me, that is, I guess, the biggest win is just being able to, again, like I said, close those divides and build bridges, because I don't know if you're aware, but 12% of our country served in World War II. 8% served in Vietnam, but there was the draft, so everybody knew somebody. And right now we have less than 1% of the population serving. And so it's just always pushed to the back burner, and people don't think about it or talk about it as much as they used to.
Absolutely. That's a very interesting statistic that you just shared to end that as well. So I wanted to shift just because you have, I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years. You have a pretty impressive resume, and some pretty, I think, really cool jobs and roles that you served in. What advice do you have for veterans who want to advance their careers but find they aren't getting the same support or opportunities as other counterparts?
Well, I think I want to share that there are so many amazing opportunities out there. And if finding the right person who has those resources is huge. I mean, as a veteran, I've been able to go to Austin, Texas in a Wounded Warriors 5-day retreat. And I've been out to, and if anybody's looking to donate as we come up on Giving Tuesday, that's a great company. But also there's this thing in Montana called Warriors in Quiet Waters, where they send soldiers or veterans, post 9/11 veterans, to go fly fishing for 5 days out on the beautiful rivers in Montana. And you get to get all the fly fishing gear so you can come home and use that as part of your natural therapy. And you're there with other veterans and they treat you like royalty. And these are just some of the really amazing opportunities I've had. You get college paid for. I'm an opportunist, so I will take advantage of things that are, given my way. As you mentioned, I have 2 master's degrees that I could get based on the military paying for them. And one of the things I didn't bring up was the day that Saddam Hussein was captured. The day after that was one of the scariest days of my life. And I didn't think I was going to make it out of there alive. And so I gave myself a promise on that day that I would never do anything I didn't love in this life, because it's too fleeting. I wasn't going to keep a job that stressed me out. I want to do things that I know are impacting those around me in a positive way. And so I've held a few very interesting jobs. And right now, as the Parks and Rec director, I'm so happy. The stress level is manageable, and I get to make huge positive impacts in the recreation of those around us and like make the parks better. It's just a really beautiful fit. And so go to your local county veteran service officer if you're from Wisconsin. And if not, there's veteran centers throughout the world or the country, and find somebody who can help you.
This next question comes from one of the guests. Did you have any problems with getting services for your traumatic stress from the military?
I was so lucky that I found, as soon as I walked in, they're like, oh, she needs somebody. And they gave me a therapist named Amy. And I actually got to teach her son, which was the coolest thing, when I was at West High School in Madison. And she was the perfect fit for me. And she gave me everything I needed. So luckily for me, I didn't have to wait. And I got to talk to somebody right away, and I got to talk to the right person. So yes, very, very fortunate that way. But I know that some other veterans are suffering in different ways. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you were, it was so fortunate to have found someone so quickly for that. Next question, how would you recommend one responds in the moment when a loved one might be triggered?
That is such an awesome question. And I ultimately think that that is a conversation you have to have with that someone before it happens or after it happens, but when they're in a better place. Because I have had to literally say to my husband, when this happens, this is what I need. Not because he wasn't trying, but because I needed him to know I needed a second. I had to go away. I had to like watch something silly on TV to like get my mind away from where it was, get out of my internal cycle of like bad thoughts and just release and cry. And then I could reintegrate. But when you're like, what's wrong? How can I help? Tell me what to do. It's like, I can't answer you. And then when I can't answer you, you get frustrated, but that's so anyways, have that conversation with that person because that person might need you just to give them a hug and hold them until they're done, or let them go and be angry and hit a punching bag for half an hour and then come back and they're okay. I mean, it's all of those different intricacies and nuances with each individual you have to get to know.
Absolutely. I got one more question for you as we kind of wind down here. We're coming close on time. Here at DreamBank, we are a community that is built up of fellow fearless dreamers. What's one piece of advice you have for someone who's actively pursuing a dream right now?
I'd say keep going and don't give up because life is so amazing. I mean, I got home and I was defeated and I just kept pushing and I every year I just feel like I can find more and more joy in what I do. And so it may seem hard at first and it may be a struggle. Surround yourself with the right people, stay away from drama and just keep pushing forward and doing what you know is right.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that, Laura. And that looks like all the questions that we have right now. Lots of praise coming in from our guests today. Thanking you for sharing your story. And again, I want to echo that sentiment. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for sharing the story. Thank you all for tuning in today and listening to Laura. But yeah, with that, we will go ahead and cap it there and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me.